One of the main concerns that some parents have been raising about online behaviours is sexting, and really I think a lot of my generation particularly aren't really understanding what sexting is about and how young people are using online environments. Now, we often think about online environments to be doing, with your PC at home, etc. But I understand that a lot of young people are using mobile devices, iPads, digital cameras, etc., etc., to record themselves and post things online. Now, Dr. Bond is with us, and she's got a great deal of information that she has researched herself about young people's behaviours online. And I know one of her areas that she talks about and has spoken about nationally and internationally is about sexting. So I'm going to pass over to Dr. Bond to tell us, what is sexting, who's doing it, and is it a common thing that young people are doing?
Sexting is very common.
Okay.
And it is not as new as some of the sort of newspaper headlines are sort of giving us to believe.
Okay.
I mean, I spoke in 2007.
Right.
I spoke to quite a large number of young people about what they were doing with mobile phones.
Right.
And even then, sexting, even though the term wasn't that sort of familiar, that is what they were doing, and it was very commonplace. It was very, very mundane.
Okay.
And this was, even 11-year-olds at that time, they weren't necessarily doing it, but they were certainly talking about it, and they knew of it.
Okay.
But most of the young people that I spoke about were very familiar with sexting. It was almost part of growing up, exploring a relationship. Sexting basically involves either text messaging, sexual content,
yes,
or also using photograph or video that is then sent to somebody else.
Okay.
Now, sexting there's a lot of blurred boundaries, if you like, between private and public.
Sure.
So what quite often happens with sexting is that a young person, in the context of an intimate romantic relationship, teenagers enjoy exploring each other's bodies.
Yes.
Let's not,
Absolutely,
the behaviour, if you like, is fairly typical of teenage behaviour, growing up, getting sexuality, sexual identity, etc. Exploring each other's bodies, but they're doing it using internet-enabled technical devices.
Sure.
So sending a picture of themselves, perhaps a slightly sexy shot, or pictures of their intimate body parts, or them naked, or performing a sexual act, which is sent to another in the context of that intimate relationship.
Sure.
Now, the problem is that teenage relationships don't always last. And they fall out, and that image or that message or that video is then made public. It's shared.
Sure.
Now, either through towards other mobile devices, or being put up online, or being put via another social media source.
Sure.
And so the
immediately it can go global.
Yes. So hundreds of people are seeing these pictures. And that is when, for young people, the humiliation, the embarrassment really, really sets in. So if you like, the risk around sexting, you have to remember that it is different, and quite often young people do not perceive the risk because they have sent it to somebody that they trust.
Yes, of course.
And what is interesting, I think, in terms of sexting is, as you were saying, as adults, perhaps it's not something that we've particularly thought about, because, well, I don't know about you, but when I was growing up, if I wanted to take a picture of myself naked to send to somebody, I'd have had to have borrowed my father's camera, which was actually locked in a cupboard. I'd have had to save up my pocket money, go and buy a film,
which was not cheap,
work out how to get the film out of a pod and into the camera. Now, I'd have exposed the film before I'd exposed myself. Balance this camera, on a chest of drawers or something, they're quite heavy things. Somehow take my clothes off, take a photograph of myself, get the film out without exposing the film, take it to the chemist, get it developed, by which time the lady in the chemist would probably have phoned my mother.
Yes, exactly.
Now, this is, you know, you sort of think, that sounds quite funny.
But also in that time, you've kind of had time to consider
Exactly.
your actions, haven't you?
Yeah.
And the consequences of possibly those actions
Yes.
before the lady in the chemist had phoned your mother.
Yeah.
You probably had cooled off a little bit.
Yeah, or, you know, is this a good idea?
Yeah.
Now, if I was successful in doing that, those photographs were produced on paper.
Yes.
Yes, I would
One
probably have
copy,
held the negatives, and if I wanted to give somebody a picture of myself naked, I would have given them a paper copy.
Sure.
Now, yes, they could probably have passed that round, but the ease by which, with a mobile phone that is a camera, it is also internet connected, young people can very easily pop into a toilet. If they're in a pub and they've been out drinking, just taking a picture in wherever, they can very quickly, click, click,
It's gone.
take a picture and it's gone.
Yeah.
Once it's gone, they cannot get it back.
No.
And that's the thing, and there's very little time or space within that click, click to think, actually, is this a good idea?
Yeah.
So
That's a very good point. Yeah,
I mean,
it's so rapid, isn't it?
Yes.
And then we talk about digital footprints, and then that's it. You've who does what with your photos is out of your control.
You've lost control of it completely. Now, what we also have to remember that young people sending images of themselves to each other is behaviour that perhaps, and I've written about this. You know, is it how different is it to the bike shed explorations of our teenage years? They are exploring each other's bodies. They're also living in an increasingly sexualised world.
Yes.
So they're living. They're growing up in a world that is far more sexualised. You've got Ann Summers on the high street.
Sure.
You know, when I was a teenager, the sex shop was on the outside of the town and it had got blacked out windows.
Sure.
You look at music lyrics, you look at content on television and music videos, it's very sexualised.
Sure.
So for them, their behaviour is part of growing up in a very sexualised society.
Yeah, sure.
Now, there are some very good resources around talking to young people about sexting.
Okay.
Now, one of the things that's really important to talk to young people about is if they pass a sexualised image of somebody under 16 on,
Right. Yes.
they are passing on illegal content.
Yeah. And that's very important.
It's also
to
talking
remember.
to them actually about the legality of this, but also I have to say when I did my research, some young people have developed strategies to keep themselves safe. One 14-year-old boy said to me, if you're going to take a picture of yourself naked, he said, don't put your face in it. It's jolly good advice,
It's
actually.
jolly good advice, and it keeps you safe. And it, you know, you could deny that was ever you if it was passed around at school or went global or whatever. That is an incredibly good piece of advice.
So I think sometimes, you know, again, like we were saying about the pornography, we do need to have these conversations.
Definitely.
Also, if young people receive material of a sexual nature and they know that it's somebody in their class or somebody, young person that they know, rather than passing it on, actually, you know, don't pass this material on, but, you know, try and get help to somebody if it is going viral and you know that person is probably feeling quite embarrassed, quite humiliated, rather than making the situation worse, you know, trying to do a damage limitation. Because quite often young people pass images on thinking it's a bit of a joke or it's funny without thinking about the consequences of them passing on the material without that person's actual consent.
Yes. That's
so I think consent is a really key issue to talk to young people about. And if somebody has sent you an image of themselves because you are in a relationship with them, you know, having the respect and the responsibility, if you do fall out,
of knowing what to do with that material and being responsible about that. And I think it comes back to the same sort of conversations that we've had many times about, you know, let's educate young people, let's give them some scenarios. We've got some fantastic videos from CEOP that you can use in assemblies, you can talk to your young people about.
And for parents as well, to actually start saying, look, you know, I've looked at these videos. I've actually looked at the one on sexting, I think by COP, is called Exposed, saying, look, you know, I've watched this. Absolutely. What do you think? Has this ever happened? You know, if you were going to do it, because we also have to remember that this is part and parcel of a wider context of growing up. Young people perhaps are experimenting with alcohol, experimenting with drugs, where perhaps their inhibitions or the boundaries are different because of that. So whereas they wouldn't normally think, oh yes, I will send a picture of myself, or I'll send so-and-so this message, if you've had a couple of drinks, your ideas around what could be funny or appealing can be very, very different. So also talking to young people about sort of safe texting, and say, actually, you know, good rule of thumb is, if you've had a couple of drinks, you know, don't start getting on your phone and
don't post anything online that you wouldn't be happy that your granny saw, or something like that. That's the important thing as well, isn't it? Because unfortunately, as you said, 2 clicks and it's gone, and it's completely out of your hands then, and you've got to remember the consequences. So I think the sort of the message here is, it is going on. We've got to, you know, we've got to face that. It is going on. But what we need to do is not only for children and young people to remember what they are posting online, but we need to remember that as adults as well, don't we? Because we often post things online on Facebook, etc., that may be detrimental to our, you know, our careers, our friendships, our relationships, and to our own health and well-being. But thank you for giving us an outline. It's really, really interesting to talk about these issues out in the open. And if you're worried about some of the content that your young person has put online, you know, talk to them about it, but also, you know, let's talk to them about it before they consider their options. Let's give them some.
This is the thing. I mean, if you even look at some of the pictures from primary school, for example, girls pulling down their top, a very sexy pout.
Yes.
You know, part of growing up is young people quite often want to look older than they are. Part of that is looking quite sexual. There's been recently cases in primary schools of girls and boys taking pictures of each other in the toilet. Now, that's seen as a bit of a joke, but actually the images are not. And we do need to talk to young people, especially in primary school as well, around privacy, about consent, about responsibility, this whole idea of digital citizenship, being responsible, using mobile internet technologies, and
in a responsible way, and thinking about what you're doing before you're doing it and when you're doing it. Okay, well, thank you very much for that. It was really, really interesting talking to you, and I think we'll leave it there. Thank you. Great.